in love with him. In return, he decided to tell me that he liked cheeseburgers more than me. My 5-year-old heart was crushed. We are all too familiar with those embarrassing memories that we just can't seem to get out of our heads. And each of us regrets something we've done in our lives. Maybe we regret a fight with our family or losing a friend. Or, obviously for me, confessing my love to a boy who was already in a committed relationship to cheeseburgers. Psychology today reinforces our understanding that regret is the negative cognitive or emotional state that involves blaming oneself for a bad outcome. Obviously, my confession of love in preschool had a pretty bad outcome for a 5-year-old. But should I really be having regrets over something that was completely out of my hands? After all, we can't control every possible outcome. So today, let's first confess our love and watch the beginnings of embarrassment unfold as we look at the causes of regrets. Then we'll break our hearts and examine just how regret affects us. And finally, we'll move on and come to terms with our regrettable actions. We most commonly regret our long-term life choices, like education, career, romance, parenting, and even our own sense of self. We regret these choices when we can picture a different outcome. In fact, when we are shown the better, more successful outcome, our ventral striatum, or the part of our brain that processes positive rewards, shows a significant decrease in activity, while our amygdala, or the part of our brain that processes emotional reactions, shows a significant increase in activity due to the sensation of threatening stimuli. When we're in control of our choices, our brain has a much stronger reaction to our own failures. We put blame on ourselves, feeling the undeniable dread that we could have and should have done something different. Inevitably, we beat ourselves up for trudging through a muddled situation that in hindsight looks completely clear. We constantly criticize and analyze our choices, and younger people struggle more with regret because we have this inability to disengage from these emotions, because we easily convince ourselves that we've completely messed up our future and there is no going back. Teenagers believe that the world has this aspect of irreversibility, that even our smallest mistakes can completely ruin the ideal future that has been set before them. It is both the misguided sense of self-blame and the crushing fear of the future that initially causes the heavy weight of regret. So this is why I still lay awake at night remembering every stupid thing I said to that preschool boy. Now, the reasons teens deal with regret more than adults is we have a fear of ever failing or even making a mistake. We have regret aversion, which stems from our desire to avoid feeling responsible for a bad outcome. But these fears only contribute to our regrets because we begin to see all the lost opportunities that lay in our wake, creating an endless cycle of regret and fear that runs our lives. This idea of grieving over who and what we could have been is referred to by psychologists as our lost possible selves, or our idealized doppelganger, the person we wish we were. Now, my own personal lost possible self is the 30-year-old soccer mom married to my preschool crush. Yes! All kidding aside, according to Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky's Commentary on Behavioral Finance, Loss and Regret Aversion, this idea of regret over an action is called omission and becomes what we regret in the long term. These omissions most commonly become our deathbed regrets, of never spending enough time with our family or never saying sorry before it's too late. These types of regrets can tear away at us for years to come. The New York Times newspaper reports that fixating on these types of mistakes can cause intense feelings of regret and happiness that can shift drastically. This unnecessary rumination keeps us from re-engaging with life. We unintentionally keep ourselves locked into a prison of our own making, letting our past dictate our future. In other words, regret doesn't allow us to cope or move on. Now, instead of going along with our society's ideal to simply live a life without regrets, we need to learn that regrets are inevitable. We simply need to learn to come to terms with them. And we can do this in two ways. First, we need to learn to look at our past with complexity. Complexity is defined by the New York Times as one's ability to incorporate various points of view into a recollection, to vividly describe circumstances, context, and other dimensions. In other words, to utilize objectivity in the way we remember past events. Laura A. King, a psychologist at the University of Missouri, conducted a study proving that those who have a higher ability to talk about a regret with complexity are much more psychologically mature. King's study proves that coping with regrets is how we mature as human beings. And second, we need to learn from our regrets. Regret, like any and all emotional responses, has a positive function. Just like fear makes us rethink a potentially bad or dangerous situation, regret makes us learn something from those bad decisions. While writing this speech, I, in my whirlwind of work, school, extracurriculars, and just generally being a high school student, I realized that I hadn't spent more than 20 minutes with either of my parents in over a month. I began going over it in my head, and I realized that my days of living at home were numbered. And if I spent the rest of high school running around trying to make deadlines, I was going to miss out on this brief period of time I got to spend with my parents. For some reason, I, like many others, believe that I can make up the time to my parents later. But where do we draw the line? When are we going to realize that being president of this club or making that deadline or making this commitment is never going to make us happy? According to a 2012 Forbes magazine article, this idea of work now, family later is the #1 deathbed regret. And I'm already committing it. Maybe so are you. So make the change. Stop ignoring your regrets and letting them snowball into lifelong consequences. The trick isn't to disregard your regrets. It's to learn from them. You know, I actually dated that preschool boy years later. But this time it wasn't cheeseburgers he liked more than me. It was his truck. Sad but true. I can honestly say that I've taken that past experience and learned to never date a guy who likes inanimate objects more than he likes me. I've taken that past experience and adjusted my future approach. So, what have we learned? Well, we first confessed our love and watched the beginnings of embarrassment unfold as we saw that regret is caused by self-blame. We ruminate about things like lost opportunities and friendships, even when we have so little control over these outcomes. We put blame on ourselves, even when unpredictable variables are involved, like people's internal thoughts and feelings. Then we broke our hearts and examined how regret affects us, finding that regret forces us to have intense emotions and keeps us from re-engaging with life. Finally, we moved on and came to terms with our regrettable actions, finding that we can look at our past for complexity that may exist, and we can own our regrets so they don't paralyze us. So maybe I have made some questionable decisions in my life, and I may on occasion lose sleep at night because of the choices I've made. But I've learned that that's okay. It's okay to have regrets, but it's important to not let those regrets paralyze me from my past, and dictate my future.